Oh, uh, well, we'll see if we can fix that. Hey, um, okay. I'm going to do a quick intro, Rex. Hopefully, we can avert a disaster on that. Do you want to check that? I'll do an intro here. Once you check your, yeah, yeah, okay, all right. Okay. Well, that's the first time that's happened. You want to, while I'm doing an intro and taking care of some other business, you want to check out your YouTube stuff and see if it's okay. Okay. Um, so, all right. So for those logging on, we're trying to take care of a couple of technical issues here before we get going. Um, yeah, man, if you want to check your YouTube channel just to make sure everything's still intact, I'll do some take care of some business here. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. So, hey, everybody, Larry Powell here. Welcome to Studio HFL live with, and tonight's guest, of course, is Rex Richardson. We're trying to take care of a couple of tech issues here. A little surprise as he was logging on. But I'll take this opportunity to again welcome you and say that I'm glad you're here. Glad you've been showing up for these live interviews. I want to let you know that this is kind of cool. March 4th, just about a week, is the radio premiere of this show, and it's going to start with my interview with Byron Stripling, and then the next week will be Doc Severinsen. I'll feature Sergey and Bria. There's a whole list of people that are going to start showing up on the radio show, and I'll send out more information on that as we get going. Also, let's see. Let me remove that. The Live With series is going to keep continuing. And my first guest in March is Ben Wright. That's March 9th at 8 p.m. Eastern. And the series sponsor for March's interviews is, of course, Chop Saver, Dan Gosling and Chop Saver. Thank you, Dan and Chop Saver, for the help out there. And of course, you can go to chopsaver.com to check out more information on that. Let's see. Rex, are we doing okay? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I have no idea, man.
Okay. I owe you an awful lot of beers if something would go south on that.
I've just never seen anything like that before, so
Yeah.
I don't know why it would have
Yeah.
been
Okay.
a thing. But
yeah. So well, hey, I tell you what, while you're here, I want to pop up and show these. Rex was the first guy to see the preview of this design, and this is a new T-shirt that's coming out. This is the World Trumpet Force, and of course, you can get the acronym there in the middle of that design. The Latin Ventilabis Magis, which means push harder, right? I mean, that's a great motto for the World Trumpet Force, right? So I've got a couple of different versions. They don't just come in pink. There's 5 different shirt colors. There's gray, and then I think this one was Rex's favorite. It's World Trumpet Force. It says, "We will not be silenced." So that was my wife's design actually on that, which I thought was brilliant.
yeah,
She's got a lot of good ideas. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. There's another version in white T-shirt. So these are all going to go on pre-sale here pretty soon. So this is kind of the premiere of these designs. So yeah, you'll see more information coming out about that. Rex, you'll get a shirt of your choice out of that, and I won't make you wear pink either.
I'm cool to wear pink, man.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
I mean, whatever you see fit, it's cool with me. I'm not gonna look I'm not gonna look very good at any one of them. So it's like it's all the same to me. Speaking of which,
oh, you know what? I was wondering if you were going to wear that tonight. Yeah, man, I tell you what, when you first wore that on social media, sales of that shirt went through the roof. So I appreciate that.
You went from like 0 to like 3?
No, I went from 0 to like, I don't know, 30 or so
Wow.
or more. Yeah, no, it was great.
I want you to know that I wore this all day. I wore this shirt all day, man. While I was teaching lessons and practicing and running errands, it was like this is my uniform for the day.
It was just getting you in the mood, right? It's just putting you in that right frame of mind.
Yes.
That's
Yes,
great.
it was. Yeah.
That's great. So when you wear that WTF shirt, that also is going to put you in the right frame of mind,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And
Yeah.
most people won't even notice the acronym. Sure, they'll be like, "Oh, more
Yeah.
trumpet stuff." I think it's funny because in the gym, I go every day and I have shirts, and most of them are just trumpet shirts because they're things I've gotten at festivals. You know, you play a festival, something you get a free shirt, and so these guys must be like, "This guy must be the biggest trumpet dork in the world." And I'm like, "Well, I kind of am, but
Right.
if it helps, I didn't actually purchase most of these shirts."
I mean, you know, how many mouthpieces, how many mutes, how many trumpets? I mean, you are just like everybody else, every other one of us, right? We're all trumpet nerds, trumpet dorks, trumpet geeks, right?
One way or another, indeed, yes.
In one way or another. Or how many file cabinets of music,
Right.
right? How much have we amassed over the years that we don't want our spouse to find out about, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
oh no, and I think Jenny might be watching this too, so I might be in trouble there.
See, well,
But
starting to get rid of an old mouthpiece stash, man, like a few years ago, and all of a sudden we start seeing some of these old prototype cabs from Pickett showing up like on eBay or something, and those cabs were like, what happened? And it took me a moment to realize what must have happened. I didn't even know they were in there. So yeah, it's dangerous to get rid of old stuff.
well, so at least she didn't pitch them, right? So she put them on eBay.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think she did. She might have just given them away, and then that person put them on eBay. She just wanted to get them out of the house. So we didn't really benefit from it other than making the house a little more to her liking in terms of the you know, what's in the house. So you know, what can you do?
But you still haven't found the Holy Grail mouthpiece, right?
No, I have to say I'm a bit. I'm not as informed about equipment as many trumpet players are. I've kind of always been fairly nuts and bolts. For most of my life, I've played something in the range of a 1.5C, and that's kind of what I do now. So I had with Pickett brass, I had the Omni. You know, they came up with that name because it was sort of, you know, you can use it in different styles, and that was about a 3B. And at a certain point, I was listening to a recording, actually from, there you are. I was listening to a recording from the last album of actually the Plogue, and when I did it kind of live in the room with the brass band in the hall, and I was like, there was something about the sound I didn't really like, and I know it wasn't the craftsmanship in the mouthpiece, it was more just the design, and something told me going back to a little bit wider diameter and a little more of a C cup might be the ticket. So far, I've been really happy with this one. So this the Omni 2. It's very close to, you know, a Bach artist in 1.5C, but Pickett has kind of put his magic into it. And yeah, I love it. I mean, I guess it's as close to a Holy Grail as it could be for me, because there aren't that many things I try to do on the trumpet compared to some people. I can't play as high as you, so I don't try. Man.
Oh no! That's not true. That's not true. I've heard you hang out way, like, I don't know, 4 octaves above me at least on some things. So hey, you know what? This is a good time. You know, I use this picture. Do you remember where this was?
Yeah, that was at the University of Indianapolis with you and Doc.
That's when you and I met, and we were playing Kevin McKee's Under Western Skies.
That's right. That's right. Great
and
piece.
You know, I love that picture, you know, mainly because I'm in it. No, I love that picture because it's proof that I get to stand next to greatness.
Oh,
you know,
shut up.
No, well, I'm serious. You know, you know, you could think I'm being sarcastic or on that, but I'm not. I love that. Just the chance to share the stage, especially the last few years, you know, to get to know so many great players and share the stage with everybody, and to realize that everybody's so welcoming, right? And what blew me away about that weekend, that conference here in Indianapolis, was yes, it was you and Doc, but you invited me. You said this. It was the Louis Armstrong. It was Jim Stevenson's arrangement of was it Louis Armstrong tribute,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it finishes with Saints. And you said, "Hey, why don't you join me when I get to that part? Come on stage." And I'm like, yeah, man. I think I had played this a year or two before, so I kind of remembered, and I knew what key we
Yeah.
were in. And so I was already jacked to do that. And then at intermission, you turned to Doc and you said, "Hey, Doc, you join us too." And I mean, I didn't even need to play at that point. I could have just walked down on stage with you guys. But that was, and I should have put a picture up of that. But that was truly one of the most memorable times I've ever been on stage. And it just the whole thing. Your master class that weekend. But you know, uh, it was also it's like the first time I met Ronnie Rom. It's like you look up to these people, but you realize, man, these are just great human beings,
Mm.
and you love listening to them play. I love listening to you play, but it's like you were as much, if not more fun to just hang with,
Oh,
you know,
thank you, man.
and
That's fairly kind of you. Really kind of
well,
you.
and again, that's why I'm getting such a kick out of doing these interviews, right? Is because it's just like, man, it's a hang.
It's
I
a
got to
big.
figure out how to make the hang. I don't know what the FL is going to be on that. Maybe not something we can say out loud, but but we'll figure that part out. But
A hang
uh,
full of love.
hangful. Oh, dude, that's it right there.
Like, right,
Hangful of love.
you might have to throw an O in there, H fall, but it's
We'll
still,
do it.
you may not need it. Just it's a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
article after all. So, but it's true that it's just a big fellowship, isn't it?
yeah.
And I think that's something all of us remember being students. Where we see people like Doc and Ron and Vizzuti and Bergeron. All, I mean, the list goes on. And what's amazing to realize is most of these cats they're just good people, man. They love music and they love the trumpet and they love being around other trumpet players. And most of them are not, there's no bad vibe and there's no jaded kind of thing. As you and I know, I mean, none of us feels great all the time. None of us is really like, oh yeah, I really want to, talk to people after this concert, especially if you feel like, wow, this wasn't my best show, but it's like what I started to see is all those folks, they always knew that what was most important is like how you interface with people. I mean, one of the things that really struck me was with Alan Vizzuti. This would have been, I can't remember which ITG it was, but it was a number of years ago. And he did a recital and it was, just slamming good. And we're all blown away, of course. But he comes backstage and Alan, of course, he's never impressed with himself. So he's just very, very quiet. He's like, oh, thank you. As people saying nice things. All these heavy trumpet cats are there, and all of a sudden a little kid walks up holding the trumpet. He must have been 8 years old or something. And Alan's attention went boom. All of a sudden it was all about the kid. All these important trumpet players didn't really matter so much then. It was really all about this little kid with the trumpet who wanted Alan's autograph or something, and he gave him his full attention. And I was like, man, that's the real stuff right there. That's this is the kind of person I want to be like. I want to aspire to be like Alan Vizzuti, and the list goes on. I mean, most of the people you run into in this business are like that, which is amazing. It's amazing to realize,
The older I get, and I think we all at some point probably fit that stereotype of the egotistical trumpet player, right? Where our own ego is too big for whatever room we're in, right? I mean, and then we graduate high school and we realize, but I think with age and experience comes this realization that we're supposed to share this, right? What we get the
Yeah,
opportunity to do is we're supposed to share whether we teach or perform, right? And we're supposed to connect. And especially these days, uh, boy, that's as important as ever, right? For us to really just share what we can do, what we know,
right.
um,
For sure.
and I so many performances where I've been in the audience and moved, and I'm thinking, Because when you're on the other side of that horn, right, you realize the importance of it. And so then when you do get to stand on stage, you realize I got a responsibility, right, to move these people out there.
Yes, and that's such a great point, because I think it's something I was just talking with this about this with a student the other day, where the student sometimes, especially younger players, they don't see a connection between what they hear in a moment like that and what they can do. So they might hear poke on or watch a video of Maurice Andre or some great player and just be like, oh man, this is so beautiful. And then they get on stage and like, oh, I don't want to make a mistake, and then I'm like, no, that's not your mindset. What you want to connect with. I mean, yeah, we get in the practice room and we work on precision and accuracy and facility and all these things that contribute to our attempt to become a great player. But when you get on stage, what you need to remember is that experience you had. So because you want to evoke that in the listener, something similar, so what I always try to do is when I'm on stage, a big part of where my head is what would I want to hear in the back of the room if I was in the room right now? What would I want to hear? And so that's what I'm trying to project. And because I know what I would think is, oh, it's beautiful and it's moving. I'm really having an experience. It's uplifting. It's not going to be the same for everyone, of course, but all we can do is start with our own experience. And chances are, if you can get into that zone and do that successfully, a lot of people are going to have a good experience, and you essentially fulfilled what the mission is, which is to share something beautiful ultimately, right? I mean, that's all the trumpet chops and jokes and everything aside. That's really what it's all about. And when we can get into that frame of mind and deliver that, it makes everything else so much easier. It alleviates anxiety. It takes us out of the sort of stress of our everyday lives, and it just puts us in this zone. It kind of reminds us why we wanted to be musicians in the first place. A lot of it started with having an experience like that, I remember watching Tim Morris and Andre Cohn with the Boston Pops, watching them play on TV when I was like 13, and just being transfixed and looking at my trumpet. And I was also confused. They were playing C trumpets. I was like, there's something wrong with my trumpet. Well, is this a toy? It doesn't look like theirs, And
All right.
but it all kind of fed that fascination and curiosity and set the stage for me. Really wanted to try to learn the instrument,
The first time I heard you live was with Rhythm and Brass, mid '90s, and we've talked about this in other interviews. But you and I mean, the whole gang, Villarubia, who else? I don't want to leave anybody out now. Shuhan, who
Alex
else?
Shuhan on the horn and piano, and David Gluck on the on percussion and sometimes piano, and he was kind of the main composer arranger. And then Tom Brantley on trombone.
Yeah, and the entire group brought it. So that was my first experience with you, and then to see and stand with you on stage and experience that same thing. So live experience, you might think it's easier to make that connection, right? That you're talking about, and to move people, but going back to the CD you referenced a few minutes ago with a Plogue on there, I have to tell you, how we used to say I wore that vinyl out, right? I've kind of worn that CD out because there's some
Nice.
absolutely, that particular piece, and I have to say, it's not just your playing, but the ensemble behind you was smoking,
yeah,
right?
the brassman is such a Florida, and the piece is so great. I mean, Tony is another one of those. He's just a total unassuming genius,
But
you meet Tony Plogue, and he just kind of talks like this, and he's real, make some jokes, and right. You're like, I forget that I'm dealing with one of the baddest cats ever because he's so unassuming. But yeah, it's an amazing little piece, man. It's a beautiful little concerto. I love that piece.
But even on the recording, you were able to make that connection, right? I mean, you're still able to move people, and I think, I'm sitting here now thinking, how is that possible that we can have that same connection with a live performance as we can with a recording? It doesn't always happen that way, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with there's got to be certain chemistry in the recording process, and that whole album was so weird in so many ways because each piece was a completely different recording scenario. one was recorded in Florida, one piece was recorded in Arizona, one piece was recorded in England, the other was recorded in Tokyo. And then the solo parts, some of them were recorded in Richmond, Virginia. One of them was recorded live in Florida. And the worst scenario was 2/3 of one was done in England, yet the rest of it was done in the studio just because of running out of time. Those guys are putting together like 4 or 5 concertos in that album in a weekend.
Wow.
And ended up being, that was kind of a new one that none of us really knew. And it ended up being a bit overambitious. But anyway, the chemistry that's there is a key. And always to some degree in the recording, some portion of that is manufactured. In a live performance, you get what you get, and it's like you put it out there and you get all the blemishes and all the things that are perfect, which to me are part of what makes it
absolutely
really cool and honest to listen to. In the recording, you're going to come up with something that's no perfect, but somehow, no matter what the circumstance, you're trying to bring that same energy and commitment. I think for the Plogue, what made it easy was, or relatively easy to find, that was really the band and Chad Shootman conducting. Those guys, and they have a great spirit. It's one of those, they're very much in the tradition of, I think, the great British brass bands, where they develop this character, this personality, and they play together with a really kind of special energy. And those guys brought that same energy, and so did Chad at the podium. So it felt so good to play with them. And I think that's why, even after, chopping together different takes and, putting it all together, it still had a nice chemistry.
Are you familiar with Remission, that Ryan Anthony's CD? Have you listened to that?
Yes.
So it starts. I can't remember the name of the first. I think Remission is the first piece on there. But then the Lieberman Concerto that's on there. The playing on that is absolutely spectacular. And of course, there's so much of a deeper meaning to that recording, I think, because of Ryan, right? And the circumstances surrounding it. So I think even the listener is more invested in this album than maybe, it's not a casual listening. But just thinking about the effect of even that recorded performance still is so powerful, so moving. And I guess, go back to the first time I would come home from school and put the records on, right? And it was the Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops, and great recordings, right? The first time I heard Al Hurt was on one of those recordings, blown away. So, I guess thinking back now, it's like, yeah, man, I was moved from the very beginning. I didn't realize it, but, hearing Al Hurt, now I realize who he is all these many years later. It's like, well, no wonder I was moved, right? I mean, what a beast.
I know. And speaking of Ryan, I mean, that one of the things about, there's so many amazing qualities with his playing, but I heard him and played with him when he felt great and when he felt terrible. And the one thing that never changed, because there's some, it was impossible given what he was going through at times, to have his best consistency all the time. None of us really does, even when we're not going through what he did. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the trumpet. So it as Dizzy said, sometimes the trumpet wins, and it's one of those days. But Ryan always, man, he never held back. There was always this kind of this just plunge right over the cliff kind of approach to sharing the song. It was always a singing quality. So that was something that just always blew me away about his playing. No matter what he was doing, if he was sitting behind, he would play soprano, cornet in the brass Battle Creek on occasion, or just one of the other cornet parts, or hearing him as a soloist, or standing next to him in some occasions. It was always the same, man. It was like you just walk away going, that was incredible. That was a yet another unforgettable experience,
Right.
But it is true, and then he brought that to his recordings too. I mean, it's the same quality. And when I was getting to do my my classical I mean, I've done, I guess, a number of quote unquote classical
Mhm.
recordings, but the real one, with the Telemann, Albinoni, and Haydn and Hummel, that stuff. I was checking out his version of the Albinoni that he did with Gary Beard, the organ, because I knew, Maurice Andre and these other recordings I love, but I knew I had to get Ryan's approach in my head and draw upon that energy and try to reproduce some element of that if it was going to sound good, And so yeah, miss that guy, man. That's another story altogether, isn't it?
Right. And yeah. Well, yeah, it's hard to believe. June 23rd. I think
23rd, yeah.
it's going to stick in my head just like everybody else. But
Yeah.
you know, think back if you can, that first experience where you're like, whether it's as a pro or not, where you're like, holy crap, I got to do this. I got to keep doing this. I mean, do you recall when that happened?
I remember the period. It was as I just turned 14, so I was kind of like, I think, finishing my 8th grade year, going into freshman year or something. And at the time, my father was in the Coast Guard back then. We were stationed in Hawaii for a bit, and so I remember being on campus checking out the University of Hawaii. And I don't know what it was about that particular experience. I don't remember, but I remember being there and deciding that I wanted to be a music major. And this is before I'd even really started to practice and really started to learn the trumpet in any kind of serious fashion. But something clicked for me. It might have had something to do with the exposure to the Boston pop stuff and starting to raid my mom and dad's record cabinet, excuse me, with some of the old big band recordings and, checking out Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass and all this music from that period. Something just really pulled me in. And then from there, this was still in Hawaii. It just started, it's when I just started buying records. And of course, like you, I'm sure at the time, it was vinyl. Winston's first recordings were coming out, and I was discovering Maurice Andre and Rafael Mendez. And my first Miles Davis album, it's funny, I got one of probably his lesser known albums. And at first, I didn't know what to make of it. It's called Star People. And it was from like 1982, I think it came out. And he was definitely into this post kind of funk phase going on. And Marcus Miller is on it, and John Schofield and Mike Stern. And man, it's since become maybe my favorite Miles Davis record. Wow. But at first I was like, I don't know what this is, because Miles was like doing stuff. He's playing organ and trumpet at the same time. He's going, spit, bird, and I'm 13 years old going, well, I don't know what to make of this, and then I heard Winston. I was like, this sounds like trumpet playing to me.
Right.
But years later, when I rediscovered Star People and put it back on the record player, I was like, oh my God, this is so killing, So all that, it was all just a process of sometimes random discovery like that. Because after that, I started finding Miles, better known recordings and really started to plunge in that. And then Freddie Hubbard and even Woody Shaw was one of my first purchases, Master of the Art, which came out that year, I think back in 1982. And since they're one of my favorite jazz records of all time. And likewise at the time, I didn't really know what to make of it, So it's a funny process. It was all around then, I think, at some point. And for some reason, I'm tying it to that visit to the University of Hawaii, that campus, where I decided I want to be a music major. And soon thereafter, I figured out what I was in for in terms of the trouble I'd gotten myself into. So,
I'm thinking back, and like a lot of people, I went through the Maynard phase, right? I mean, that's really, Al Hirt was the first trumpet player I ever heard. And you talked about Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass. I remember, and as cheesy as that music sounds now, it's still really, you don't turn it off, do you? Right? You still listen all the way through. It's fun.
There's a reason why Herb became, I think, maybe the richest trumpet player of all time, being the A&M Records, after all.
Well, but talk about being a philanthropist, giving back too, right? I mean, what a great example of sharing. And so, thinking about that Maynard phase, it's like, I got so excited about trumpet because, and I had a jet tone mouthpiece, man, and I was going to rule the world
I
on,
got one of those too. Yeah.
and I sucked on that. I mean, it was horrible, but whatever gateway, right? However we get into discovering other players, as long as we get there, right? So, I mean, I still have a great appreciation for Maynard, but once I got to college and started trading albums, it's like that's when I found out who Doc Severinsen was. That's when I started to hear about all these other players, and it's like, oh man, you got to check this guy out, got to check this guy out,
Yeah.
and I mean, of course, it's never ending. I mean, you're still checking out the old guys, but I mean, now there's a lot of great artists coming on. In fact, I've got a student at UIndy who is a big fan of Christian Scott. I don't know if that's a name
Yeah.
you're familiar
I know
with.
Christian. He was a young guy in New Orleans when I was down there in Baton Rouge doing grad work.
Mm-hmm.
He was just kind of coming up on the scene. He was only like 14 or something and playing in the clubs and killing it. And yeah, he's great. What a great and amazingly creative artist.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like our available the people available to us to listen to is never going to stop, right? And people listen to you. I listen to you, right? But you listen
You're the
to
one. You're the one. Thank you, Larry.
but I'm the one. But you're still listening to people. It's like
Totally.
and you said something earlier that I'm going to go back and excerpt from this because it's something I think all of us try to tell our students how important it is. Oh, you're talking about the Albinoni, trying to copy Ryan's sound for the Albinoni, right? It's like, how do you know what you want to sound like unless you know what it is you want to sound like, right? You have to listen. You can't
Yeah.
manufacture a sound from nothing, right? I mean, you can, but what's it going to mean, right?
I think sometimes people misunderstand the steps in the process because the ultimate goal for any serious artist, whether you're a musician or a painter or actor, whatever, is you find your own voice, so to speak, But I think sometimes with musicians, they don't understand how that occurs. It occurs really through absorbing the language of the music that you're studying. And this is through absorbing very specific elements of other players playing. Eventually, once you've done enough of this, and it takes years, it's filtered through your own musical personality, and there's your own voice. And it's not, not everyone's going to be a Clifford Brown or a Woody Shaw or someone who's this sort of stunning innovator. But that's
okay.
It's okay. It's like what we all need to kind of aim for is like, what's my own kind of personal niche in this business? Am I able to make music? Am I enjoying myself? And do I feel good about what I'm doing? I mean, I think that's really, if we can answer all those questions with a positive answer, then we're in the right place, But that I think a lot of students misunderstand that. They're like, oh, I got to do my own thing. I'm like, well, your own thing's not so hip yet, man. And
I always try to equate it to, there's a reason that we learn functional harmony, right? I mean, you got to understand the basics. You got to understand where the box is if you want to either move the box edges or completely get out of it, right? But you got to understand the basics. So yeah, you got to be able to mimic the great players, whether it's Maurice Andre or Louis Armstrong or Clifford Brown or you name it, right? That's a great starting place. I don't want to sound like so-and-so. Well, you know what? You're not going to. As hard as you try, you're not going to.
Right.
Like Bria Stoneberg, a lot of people say she sounds like Louis Armstrong. I think, no, she doesn't. She sounds like Bria Stoneberg with a great appreciation for Louis Armstrong, right? I mean, I love her sound, right?
Yeah,
And the way she
beautiful.
Sings too is spectacular.
It's beautiful, and it's I think wholly hers. The fact that he's a big influence. So what? You know what I mean? I remember someone when I was playing at the Iridium years ago with Joe Henderson. I'm playing one night, and someone important with it was there that I was kind of hoping to impress. And my friend was there with this person, and I think this was a bigwig at Jazz at Lincoln Center or something. Mm. And afterwards, I'm like, man, do you like it? And he says, he says you sound like Freddie Hubbard, like dismissive. And I was like, really? That's awesome.
Right? Can I get that in writing?
Well, it's funny because I think he probably meant to be the dismissive and derivative. I was like, I don't care, man. I was like, Freddie and I know Freddie. That may be what you fix on, And I spent so much time trying to absorb his language as countless trumpet players have done, because what he does is so appealing, So, but I wasn't insulted by that at all. You know what I mean? And I get, sometimes someone else might revert to some player that they hear my playing, and all I can say is, wow, that's great. The study I've done has actually been successful enough that element is at least coming out in my playing. And so I don't think people should be worried about that. I think the mistake they make now, if all you did was study Miles Davis, or all you did is study Louis Armstrong, and all you did was try to play like them, you're going to just kind of sound like a bad Miles Davis or a bad Louis Armstrong. But the vast majority of people don't do anything like that. You're listening to both Louis and Miles, and you're listening to countless other artists, and not just trumpet players, obviously, too. Like in my case, I listen probably more to saxophonists than I do the trumpet players, and take their vocabulary. But we're all listening to different artists, and we're listening to different elements of the craft of each artist. And between that and our own musical personalities, it's inevitable that we're going to have a personal take on the music. That's kind of unavoidable. So it's not something to force. It's something just to let unfold, while allowing yourself to just immerse yourself in whatever musical form you're trying to master,
Okay, so let's talk about mastering form, or mastering patterns, or flexibilities, right? I mean, you've kind of been one of the many during this pandemic who've gone on, and demonstrated how to play this lick or this flexibility, which is just sick. I mean, it is ridiculous watching you guys. I will not put myself out there like that. So bravo to you guys who are brave enough to put yourself out there. But, I mean, that in itself, going back to this whole idea of sharing, giving back, I mean, what a great thing to do. And, that drove you. I'm trying to turn this big segue into 100 days of practice, right?
Oh.
I mean, right. So something came out of all this, right? All this, it's like, what was that where you're kind of like, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to write 100 days of practice. Yeah.
And it started with different phases. I mean, probably the initial seed being planted that was when I visited Switzerland, and wow, almost exactly a year ago, just over a year ago. That's kind of crazy. But I was there playing with brass band, Malaysian brass band, and not far from Geneva. It's a beautiful part of the world. One of my very favorite parts of the world. Like there are vineyards all over the slopes there, and everyone makes their own wine. It's amazing. It's just like kind of heaven for me, But I met with Jerry Mathez, who had recently kind of taken over BIM, Editions BIM, publishers there. And we met, we had dinner. We were already dealing with, he was coming to the concert because I was playing the Plogue with the brass band, as well as Vizuti's Concerto 3-1 Wind. So those are the two things I was playing. So he came to that, and we talked about some other projects, and he was interested in me maybe contributing some kind of a book if he thought I had that in me. And so I sent him some other stuff I'd done, some articles, and the chapter from the Yamaha Carl Fisher book that came out a few years ago, where a few different Yamaha artists put some stuff together. And then when the shutdown started, this 100 days of practice hashtag started, obviously. And at first I was kind of doing more what everyone else is doing, just putting together a really short video. In my case, very primitive, because I had no chops whatsoever. I didn't know how to edit. I didn't even know really how to stop, cut out the beginning of me pushing the button and stopping at the video, all that stuff, and I started to gain some skill. And then I started saying, maybe I can make something a little more involved, instead of a minute of me kind of playing through something and a few sentences about it, let me make some little pedagogical videos. And as these were unfolding, and I was staying in touch with Jerry Mathez, at some point, he says, why don't you do a book? We had a video meeting, and he says, why don't you do a book on that topic? And that's really what started the ball rolling. So a few minutes later, we kind of, got our things together and got the contract signed, and now it's underway. Now I'm in the midst of writing it.
So do you have an end date? Or not an end date, a deadline that you're shooting for?
Well, the main thing I'm focused on is when I'd like it to be in people's hands. And I'm hoping fairly quickly, like by this summer, I want it to be, distributed to folks. I'm hoping some people might find it useful for their studio teaching in the fall. One thing that's convenient about 100 days is it's about the productive period of a semester, isn't it? In the U.S. anyway.
I hadn't
If
even
you
thought about
start,
that.
yeah, I
Brilliant.
hadn't either. So I was looking at it. I was like, well, first week of September or so, obviously everyone has a little bit of a different start, but we're all talking about 14, 15 weeks or so of work. And in my case, first week of December to the first week of December is about 100 days. So I started conceiving it as sort of a semester's worth of work and trying to give a lot of structure there, but also a lot of flexibility so people can find it adaptable to their own needs. So that's what I'm trying to work on at this point.
I'm thinking, if that book were out and I had it at the beginning of the pandemic, I'd probably be only on about day 17 right now, right? With as little practice it's gotten better, right? It's gotten better. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned getting in people's hands. It's like I wasn't trying to promote this, but Roger will appreciate this, right? This duet book that he and Josh Rzapka put out, The Versatile Trumpeter. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, no, actually, I don't know that.
It's a great resource, man. It's really well written duets that come with a backing track and demos. Roger and Josh playing on this stuff, but
Is it Roger Ingram?
Yeah.
Oh, very cool, man.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant.
I couldn't see it because it was a
Oh,
reflection on the.
sorry about that, but yeah, I'll send you a link to that. But the idea is just that more resources, right? I mean, Arbin's is great, but we have to bring a relevance to things, right? And I think that's what you're doing is you're giving people something else to grab onto, which it's like Scott Belk's book, right? I mean, there's a billion way to do flexibilities. He makes it kind of fun and interesting, right?
Yeah,
And
between the hilarious titles.
yeah,
And
you could buy the book for the titles alone.
I know, it's just a comedy act, and then, but as you go through, what struck me about that book is that the way we encounter flexibility challenges in repertoire, in etudes and concertos and sonatas and such, his exercises seem to address that more directly than some of the straight up lip slur exercises that I grew up playing. So I thought that's something, unique and really helpful, really cool about that book.
So let me run this by you. I was thinking about this recently. Orchestra auditions, right? You've got your standard list. You got to play Pines. You got to play the first movement. You got to play the offstage solo. You got to play Carmen Prelude. You got to play Pictures. You got to do all this in Mahler 5. And you're thinking, okay, as a working trumpet player in a regional orchestra, when are you ever going to play a Mahler symphony? Maybe, right? So I'm thinking, the real focus for a lot of people ought to be a lot of John Williams repertoire, a lot of James Stevenson stuff. That's getting played in more regional orchestras. I mean, I know it's getting played in the top orchestras too, but it's like, why are we spending so much time playing Petrushka? How many of us are actually ever going to get a chance? Okay, I've played it a few times, but how many ever are going to get a chance to play Petrushka? Why don't we put stuff out there that what's the best way to say this? That the real guy like me is really going to get to play in a regional orchestra. Do you see what I'm saying? It's why waste my time playing Pines and working on Petrushka and all that stuff when I really need to focus on how to play, the Patriot, John Williams score. That's a tough score to play all the way through.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And all these other things. It's like, yeah, that's where you got to build your chops up. So I'm just thinking maybe that's my thing, is to put together a resource, right, that focuses on that.
Yeah, because I think all the orchestras are playing that kind of repertoire. You know what I mean? They're all dealing with film score features or even video game concerts playing. There's all kinds of creative music being written in that scene now. I think the justifications for still dealing with the old excerpts is that we know that some of them, they really tax particular skill sets. You know what I mean? Like, is there anything that's that much harder than Petrushka, really, that we're going to play frequently? I mean, it's so easy.
Yeah,
to
Ravel Piano Concerto.
Well, that's another one.
Right.
Same
Yeah.
same category. Something
Right.
that we're going to have those kind of pieces that
Right.
we might not get a lot of chance to play them. But I do think the justification for playing them is that you build skill by learning them. If you can nail Petrushka consistently, man, you can play the trumpet.
Yeah.
I'll just put it that way. You know what I mean? Because I've heard so many people, and I mean, so many people scuff it. And so many students in a master class or an audition just not play very well. So I think those skills transfer. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things I think about in the book too, because there are different approaches to building skill. One can be very repertoire focused, where you're like, I'm going to learn what I need to do by finding the pieces that tax that. But I'm not sure it works the same way for different instruments. Like I get the feeling that might be more effective for piano, say, in terms of like as you're dealing with these big war horse pieces, you're kind of encountering all the possible, technical challenges you might face. But I've always kind of gravitated towards Vince DiMartino's attitude. He really seemed to like the idea of like finding exercises that train your chops so that when the repertoire shows up in front of you, it's not that hard. You've already got the ability to navigate what the skills are. But I do think, basing that on the particular challenge in the repertoire is very important. It's even the kind of thing where one of the things I've put in this book that some people might find a little bit of a eyebrow raising thing is a fair amount of improvisation and not on the jazz side. This idea that every day you can improvise for a few minutes and the different prompts. And eventually we get into like, take a lick from the Hummel, mess around with it,
Right.
see what you can come up with, And one of the things that there's so many things you achieve by that. One is, of course, you're exercising a kind of a creative part of your mind that you don't always if you're just trying to read something and play something that's down on paper. And I think that directly influences the way we interpret music that's written down on paper. The other thing is I think you start solving technical problems when you relax with it that way. You start, you find the licks that are tough in these concertos, start messing around with them, play them in different keys, create a little cadenza out of them. And some of these things you might actually transfer directly to the concert stage, like improvise in a cadenza, for example, which I always try to do regardless of the period of the instrument, of the piece rather. And other things may just be a practice room thing, something that builds your skill, But I think it all combined. I think what I'm trying to get to in this book is this idea of being as creative and at the same time as disciplined as possible. This, the whole yin and yang concept involves, we have to remember that it's not just about the conflict of order and chaos or something. It's also what it's supposed to be about is finding that line. If you walk right on that line between the two, that's usually where you find the most success, because we need both. We need freedom and we need discipline. So what I'm trying to espouse in the book is to be as creative and thoughtful in how you put together your routine as possible, but also be very disciplined in applying your own rules. So if you don't like the rules, change them, but stick with what you've decided to do.
Right.
Because I think it comes down to two things ultimately. When what successful practicing is, very broadly speaking, A, knowing what to do, or at least thinking you know what to do, and B, doing it. Both seem very easy, especially the second part, but it's not so simple, is it? How often do we find ourselves like, oh man, I knew I was going to do this, or even like I needed to take a day off because I'm shot, but I wanted to play, and it's like, oh, okay, now I need to take another day off. Or that's maybe less rare than not being able to do the work we need to. But it all comes down to this idea of having a clear plan and actually executing the plan, and then you make adjustments. All right, I didn't like this about the plan. Cool, we're gonna change it. I think all too often, a lot of younger players, especially, there's a little bit of there's a little too much of the chaos, and maybe in fewer players, there's maybe too much of the order. They get the blinders on. I'm playing what I'm supposed to do, and it's so dull, I stopped listening to myself half an hour ago, but I'm still going through it. And that's useless as well. It's probably more useless than the chaotic practice where you might at least be having fun and you might be learning something.
It's funny. I'm reading this book by Shinichi Suzuki,
Oh,
Nurtured by Love. And he actually talks about this. Tonalization is what violinists do, or string players do when they first start. It's to find their sound. It's warming up. And I'm thinking, why don't, if we trumpet players took this approach, instead of thinking of it as warming up or going through routine, if we were like, I'm going to find my sound for today, right? I mean,
yeah.
then it's like you're really focused on what's coming out of the horn. You're not just blindly or being a robot going through the Adam routine or Chickowitz or whatever it is, and I've done all those. It's just, but I think that's a great way to think about it. I'm going to find my sound.
Yeah. And it mirrors what I remember reading Håkan was talking about with his own warm-ups where he doesn't know what it's going to sound like when he starts playing. He says sometimes it sounds like crap, which is hard to imagine
Right.
in this case. But maybe to him, he knows it's not quite right. And he sits there until we're working on the same thing until it works, and I'm
Right.
knowing him probably using James Stamp's exercise, and that reminds me of something else I've got in this book that's a key component is like the start of every routine is a bit of mouthpiece buzzing, but from the perspective of ear training, not just warming up your chops.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm instructing people, it's like, play a concert B flat and don't do a test note. How many times you play that note? Because we tend to think of like, oh, there are people with perfect pitch, and then there's the rest of us just we have to do test notes. Like, no, man, you can develop a good sense of pitch.
Yep.
Even if it's not someone who's like just like seeing a color or something instantly when you hear a pitch, you can develop a really good sense of pitch by expecting yourself to do it. So you start off playing the exercises, some of the mouth James Stamp exercises, and then you start trying to start on different notes. So every day, first thing you do is try to hear that note and start on it. And afterwards, you can check to see how accurate you are. But I think this is something else that gets us engaged. We have no choice but to listen to what we're doing. It's not routine because we're not going, oh, okay, here's an L. It's like you really have to be in control of the process with the mind's ear, so to speak. That's really what's in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can I come study with you? I've asked you this before, man. Is it too late to come get my well, if I did this with everybody, it'd be like my 14th or 15th bachelor's degree in something, right? So, no, this is great. Just all this. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm all over the place, but I'm just thinking. This is why that advertisement I put out there the other day. If the trumpet world were the Big Lebowski, Rex would be the dude, right? That's why I said that. You're the dude, man. You are, and the dude abides.
Man, I have to tell you, I love that character. I love Jeff Bridges
Right?
as the dude. So funny. Every time I see the movie's kind of bizarre. I think the Coen brothers really went, woo, but he is so funny in that role. So when I saw that, I laughed so hard. It's like, I find the dude to be quite an excellent role model for me too. To aspire to, actually. So
Yeah.
thank you for that compliment.
No, well, and I meant that, right? It's like somebody telling you sound like Freddie Hubbard. It was meant truly as a compliment, right?
Yeah,
So,
well, I don't think that guy meant it that way, but I took it that way anyway. So
yeah. Hey, I know you got to get on the road here in a couple minutes. Let me wrap up a little bit before I do anything else, though. Rosemarie Klein commented. I want to give a shout out to Rosemarie. She's a trumpet player here in Indianapolis. She says great podcast, but Rosemarie, it might be one of the most enthusiastic trumpeters and music supporters, and she shows up and she plays. She shows up for performances as an audience member. She'll come to conferences. I mean, she is out there. But what a great spokesperson for music in the trumpet world. So Rosemarie, I appreciate that you're checking into this stuff. I appreciate that, and also that you show up to the conferences here in Indy, which we hopefully will have again at some point, right?
Yes, I hope so, man. I hope so.
Let me wrap up here. Let me promote a couple of things coming up. Of course, the next live interview is going to be March 9th and that's with Ben Wright from I think one of the lesser known symphonies. I know is it Boston,
Some
right?
random place in the
Some
Northeast.
random place. And talk about somebody who's putting themselves out there. He put out a really great tutorial on Petrushka a week or two ago. It's really good. So Ben, and of course, Chop Saver Dan Gosling is helping sponsor the March interviews. So thanks again to them for that. Actually, my interview with Tom Rolfs, principal of Boston, is coming out next week, along
Very cool.
with another trombone player whose birthday is today, and that's Gene Watts. I know Gene's not
Wow.
watching, but happy birthday, Gene.
He's 85, I think.
Is he
today.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what it
Wow.
said on Facebook. Maybe he put on that. I was really kind of shocked. I was like, really?
Yeah.
But maybe he was just messing around. But
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I hope I'm not putting out wrong
Well, I don't know.
information there. But I saw the notification on Facebook and it said he was 85. So that's
Well,
amazing.
he's 85 years young, because even when I interviewed him, I'm like, it's the meditation that keeps him so centered and so full of life. I mean, 85, I would never have put him that old, but
Maybe he's messing with us, man. Maybe he's
I
messing
don't
with
know.
us. I
I
could
don't
be
know.
putting out misinformation here. So there's just a caveat, a disclaimer there on that. May not be accurate.
So Rex, I look forward to the next time we actually get to shake hands.
Me
Right?
too, man. Me too. Big time.
Not just bump elbows or something like that, but
I'm gonna give you a big hug, dude.
yeah, I'll take
That's
it.
what's up.
I'll take it. So travel safely. I really appreciate you being here tonight. And I tell you, I told you we weren't going to get into any of those off-topic subjects, and we didn't. We avoided
Right.
sex, politics, drugs, rock and roll, all that stuff, right? So
we can talk about rock and roll if you want. But.
yeah. So all right. So everybody that came in tonight, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Of course, this interview, audio and video, will show up tomorrow or the day after on YouTube and the podcast platform, respectively. Thank you, Rex, for being here. Thanks for all you're doing for the trumpet world. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. This whole thing you're doing is a wonderful service, and I hope people will support it, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. So Rex, hang on. I'm going to sign off here, and give me just a second. All right, everybody. See you later. Thanks again.